Kevin Kinkead crossing Broad. There was a lot of stuff that happened after their third straight loss, and today the shots were refired. Richardson laid him off, let him go the first day, and now today everybody got a chance to respond, and it seemed that everybody had something to say. So let's get the court in order, and Kevin Kinkead was there today, crossingbroad.com, and you were tweeting out a lot of the comments, as were a lot of your beat guys. But I'll tell you, some of the stuff that you tweeted out about Brown, and first it started with Richardson, and then Horford has said some stuff. Like, do you think that there's a problem here, or is this just some sort of three-game funk during the holidays?
They're not exactly on the same page right now. I think they said the right things today, which was basically that, that they agreed that they could probably all deal with some more accountability in the locker room and that everybody plays a role in that. They had a day off yesterday. So they took a day off on New Year's Day, the holiday, and then they got in early today and they had like a team meeting where they all sort of sit down, talk, and go over what's going on. It's not like that's kind of a thing that happens whenever they have a practice session. It wasn't like a players-only meeting or something that they scheduled that they normally would not have. But they basically had time to sit down, talk about it, and figure out what's going on. And they said they had a good practice session. But, yeah, I mean, the theme was sort of like, we agree with what Josh had to say, but there were some takes from different guys that made it seem like they were a little bit on different pages.
Yeah, because it started with Josh on whatever day, New Year's Eve, Tuesday, I guess, saying he thinks there's a lack of accountability. And then Brett Brown, he said he was fine with it. But do you think they were really questioning Brown, or was this Richardson kind of calling out somebody else? Because it seemed like everybody had somebody different they were kind of pointing the finger at here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think Josh was probably pointing that at Joel and Ben, because if you go back into his full quote, he said something to the account of, there's guys here that are new, like we don't want to step on people's toes. I think that was the quote. I said we have some new guys, we don't want to step on toes, including myself. So I think he was kind of talking as a new guy. Who happens to be older than Ben and Joel. It's kind of like an interesting dynamic, Mike, if you think about it, because typically in any locker room, like the oldest guys, the veterans are the leaders, right? But in this case, Richardson, Tobias Harris, and Al Horford are all the older guys, but they're new, and the established guys who have been here for a while are only 23 years old and 25 years old. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. So it's kind of a weird ecosystem in the locker room if you think about it. And I think he was just saying, like, we need a little bit more from Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, because, like, it doesn't matter if you're young. Like, you guys are the cornerstones of this franchise. You got to step up and be leaders.
All right, so Kev, answer me this, right? Like, let's pretend the Sixers are just one collective entity sitting on your couch and you're the therapist, right?
Okay.
I want you, because I don't want
scary.
I don't want to know what the Sixers think. We know what they think, right? We've heard that. We've heard accountability from Jay Rich. We've heard not listening to really what the coach is saying from Horford. We've heard not enough effort from Ben and from Joel. I think he was pointing the finger at Ben in a little bit, but certain guys have to do things that they're not doing. What is the number one problem facing this team right now?
The number one problem that's facing this team right now is that they just don't get up for games against lesser opponents the same way that they get up for the Milwaukee Bucks at home or the Miami Heat at home.
So it's effort.
You
just think it's an effort thing. Okay.
I just think it's effort. I think it's a mindset thing, a focus. And Brett came out today and he said as much. He was asked straight up. I think it was David Murphy from the Inquirer was there. I think he said, do you think that these guys are just coasting towards the playoffs, like cruising through the regular season or whatever? And Brett said, yeah, I definitely see it.
But hasn't Brett himself said that he almost looked like they're like coaching? He coaches like with the playoffs in mind. Like, hasn't he said that? I could have sworn he said that after, I think it was the Miami game where they zoned him up, and he was almost like, well, we're kind of like looking at the playoffs like it's not something we want to just change on Wednesday night, and you know what I mean? Like, so Brett has kind of given him that mindset almost.
Well, it's true, and you can't come out and say in October that the offense will be figured out in December. Like, wasn't that his quote? Like, the offense probably isn't going to be working until Christmas. On Christmas Day they go out and kill the Bucks, so he actually looked good with that quote for a little while. But yeah, I mean, the point being is like you can't come out and say that you want the number one seed. You can't come out and say that you want to play for a championship and then turn around and say, well, it's only December. Or this is just a regular season. We're going to be ready for the playoffs because, again, what it's going to come down to, I mean, I can see it from a mile away. It's going to be like a Game 7 on the road. because they're not doing enough of what they have to do. Now, I don't have any qualms about them competing in the playoffs. Like, they've already beaten everybody that's above them in the Eastern Conference. They beat Milwaukee, they beat Miami, they beat Indy, they beat Boston twice. So I don't have any issues with that. It's just that if you end up being a 3 seed again, I mean, you're going to have to do it on the road in the semifinals. So then you're going to have to do it on the road in the Eastern Conference finals. And then you're going to have to go to LA or wherever if you make it to the finals, So it's just like, you can't come out and say one thing and then have it be the other thing. Like, you either stack wins now and you really go for it now and you go for home court, or you say, look, it's a work in progress, but you can't have mixed messages there.
Kevin, when I'm looking through all these different quotes over the last couple days, if I really want to dig deep and come up with a conspiracy theory, I kind of point towards Embiid. And I point towards Embiid because I feel like that there could be a possibility, notice how I phrase that people in the locker room like Tobias Harris, Richardson, even Simmons and Horford aren't necessarily thrilled with how Embiid has been in and out of the lineup. He's come out himself and said, I'm coasting through games, I'm not happy. And when he's in the lineup, there's a certain identity that they need to have. They need to create space. They need to get him in the post. They need to get him the ball in certain areas. And I think they've had success with him out of the lineup at times. Do you see...
Not Wednesday.
Not Wednesday, that's for sure. But do you see a certain... do you see the same thing potentially, or am I digging too deep?
No, I think you're right, Ryan. I think there's a case to where it's like, Joel came out actually a couple of weeks ago and he said, I want to play in back-to-backs because I feel like I'm like hanging the team out to dry. If I'm sitting down and resting and we're doing load management for the playoffs and they got to go out and carry the bag for me.
Yeah.
That's not fair. So, but again, that doesn't interface. You can't interface those two ideas where you're saying you got to, deliver, quote unquote, deliver Brett Brown's favorite quote, can't deliver Joel to the playoffs and can't have him out there every single game to stack wins and to get the number 1 seed. So, yeah, I can understand why there's frustration from guys like Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons and Al Horford who are saying, well, look, are we doing this or not? Like, because we're out there every night, busting our butts to get this done, and you're not playing. So, again, it's like you're just kind of caught in between two mindsets here. Like, you're either going for it like Milwaukee and you're blowing out Detroit and Washington and all those teams on a nightly basis, or you're just going to get up for the big games, and try to rest and pace yourself on the way to get there. Like, they got to decide what they're doing here because they've said both things before. They said in the preseason that they wanted to be the number 1 seed, and then they're saying at the same time, well, we got to get to the playoffs healthy. So, it's just mixed messaging again. You can't have both of those things be true.
You posted a quote from Brett Brown today, I think, after practice or whenever you guys met with him. And a piece of that, he said, they, meaning the team, if they feel like they can be more candid with one another, then so be it. I mean, I'm interpreting everything that's going on like, no, dude, it's kind of you. Like it's we. I think a lot of these quotes, they should not be coming out. And if you were holding them more accountable, and if you had a better culture in a locker room, and if all these individuals had a more clear identity night to night and how to go about the season, then this wouldn't be happening. I didn't like how he handled, at least today.
I think it's true. I think there's something to be said for that. He also dropped a quote where he said, like, there are only so many bullets as a head coach that you have. Like, I only have so many bullets in the chamber or something like that, And I think there's a case in point to that, too. I think when you're trying to motivate 20-something-year-old multimillionaires who have supermodel girlfriends and drive nicer cars than the 4 of us ever will, it's hard to, like, motivate these guys on a nightly basis. And I think what Brett is trying to say is, like, I don't know if you guys have done any coaching ever, but I think like when you have motivational tactics in coaching, for example, like I could go up and I could be coaching like a 15-year-old basketball team or something, and I could go up to the 15-year-old and I could scream in his face, and be really ugly about it and be really forceful with it. And maybe like the 15-year-old responds to that the first time. But then if I do that a second time or a third time or something like that, it has like less of an effect. It's like diminishing returns on the effectiveness of your different motivational tools,
Sure, but I'm not even talking about motivational. I'm just talking about how he conducts his leadership, like how he runs this ship. I'm not talking about getting in Ben Simmons' face or doing win one for the Gipper speech. I'm just talking about how you hold your guys accountable over a course throughout like 365 days. I'm pulling out a speech,
No. I mean, he shouldn't have to deliver a speech before every game. I mean, at some point, these guys should be able to get up for a professional basketball game themselves. But yeah, I mean, I think there's something to it where Brett's just been around for so long, and he's the only coach that Joel has really ever had in the NBA. Only coach that Ben Simmons has had in the NBA, and so I think after a while, like, it just falls on deaf ears. Instructions from that kind of guy.
Well, how
go in one ear and out the other?
And how, I guess, crippling is that when you're trying to achieve your goal? I mean, I go back to the last time Ben hit the three. Brett came out and said, you know what, we want a minimum of one of those per game, at least one attempt per game. You don't get that. I don't think he's attempted one since. So is that like a direct defiance of what the coach wants? And if so, even though it seems like on a small level, because everybody's used to it by now, I feel like every single game that he doesn't do that, he's not really doing what the coach is asking, and that's almost emblematic of maybe of a bigger issue.
Yeah, there's definitely something for that. He technically did try one, but it was from like 48 feet, so it doesn't really count. Yeah, it was like a Denver game where he was like hauling one up before halftime. But
yeah, it's certainly not one per game.
Jeff, no. I mean, that does raise alarm bells. I think because I mean, and Brett said it in like kind of like a positive motivational kind of way. I mean, like, look at what he can be if he does shoot. I mean, we saw him. That was a beautiful three-pointer. It was a cross-court pass. It was a catch-and-shoot three-pointer. He didn't even think twice about it.
Right.
But, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think there's a little bit of a Mark Jackson thing going on here where it's just like, you have the talent. I don't think Brett's a bad coach. I just think that some of these things have a shelf life on them.
Yeah.
I think you bring somebody else in, gives those guys a kick in the ass, and maybe they just need to hear a different voice from a different person.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, I want to get your opinion on, Kevin Kinkead, crossingbroad.com. He has the full, quotes from today, and there's a lot of them. Al Horford, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Brett Brown, all speaking today about the accountability. But Joel said, the way I get better, he says, I like people want to do it best. But he said, oh, wait, where's the part where he said something about we got to do stuff. I mean, in other words, if you're wide open and you got to shoot the ball and that's the best thing for the team. He didn't mention a name. But is Joel frustrated with Ben?
Yeah, and he's I know which quote you're talking about. He said something. Yeah, if you're open, shoot the ball. I think he was talking about people individually have to like kind of help themselves. Like help me help you kind of thing. But Mike, he said something to that effect before. It was a couple weeks ago.
Yep,
I think it was the second week of December where he was like, we need Ben to shoot. We need him to shoot because that'll help us. And it's never. Here's my problem with the Ben Simmons and the shooting thing. It's never framed from his teammates or from Brett or from we, the media, in a negative way. Like it's always framed, I think, is look at what his skill set is now. He's an all-star without a shot. Like imagine what he could be with a shot. Everybody's trying to like delicately like tap their way around us and say, Ben, imagine what you could be if you actually did go out and shoot. I think everybody's trying to be as nice about it as possible. So I don't know why he won't do it. It just seems like more of a mental thing than anything. But this is not. I mean, to answer the question, this is definitely not the first time that Joel has sort of like.
Doesn't Ben have like an uncomfortability, like that he's the white elephant in the room? That everybody's like, dude, shoot. Like, I mean, doesn't he start to get that feeling of like, maybe it is me that's the problem?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're so sick of me and Jack McCaffrey asking questions about it, just go out and do it. I mean, it's like help yourself. And again, he doesn't have. It always is framed positive way. I mean, like I'm not joking when I say that. Like, I mean, his ceiling is like a younger LeBron, like an early career LeBron if he starts shooting because he can already. Everything's well as it is. I think that's where the frustration comes from a lot of people because they just see greatness in this guy and they see like an outright refusal to do the one thing that he can't do.
And for me, Kevin, it's not even about shooting. It's just about he disappears too much. Like he goes into the lane and he turns his back and he looks for anyone. I mean, he'll pass it to Franklin, the mascot. It doesn't matter. It's like you got to pick your spots and be aggressive as a scorer and want to get fouled and want the ball. He doesn't even want that.
Well, yeah, and this all manifests itself as one symptom that manifests itself in him being a non-factor in the late stages of games. We all know that what playoff basketball is. It's not running up and down the floor in transition and getting easy buckets and stuff like that. It's slow, half-court, grinded-out possessions, where you got to value the basketball. Brett Brown's going to have to call up some plays, dial up some plays to get these guys unstuck. And if there's nowhere else to put Ben but in the dunker spot, and he's not going to be the primary ball handler when he's the point guard out on the floor, then it's going to be the same thing that you saw against Toronto last year, and it's going to be the same thing that you saw in Boston the year before. So it's hard for me to sit here and say Ben has got so much better defensively, and he's, having 17 assists against the Wizards or whatever when, the aspirations are higher, the bar is higher, the goal is something different. So unless you're like identifying an improvement that helps you in the second round of the playoffs, then it doesn't matter.
Kevin Kinkead, crossingbroad.com. I want to get your take on Horford because I have tweeted out many times that Horford just seems lost. He killed the Sixers, and the Sixers don't seem to be using him anywhere near the same way that Boston used him against them, and what attracted the Sixers to him, and they're not using him in that way at all. He is a very professional guy. I mean, all my dealings with Horford, he is, you would say like, hey, coach says we got to do this, guys, so we have to do it. Like, he seems like the goody two-shoe kind of guy. But are you sensing that Horford is also getting frustrated with his role and the way that the accountability is in there?
Yeah, for sure. He had some interesting answers too. I mean, today with the Richardson thing, he basically just brushed off the accountability thing as to say that, like, Josh was frustrated with Tuesday's game and the defensive performance. He didn't seem to suggest that it was anything more than that. But, yeah, I mean, if you go back to the genesis of Brett Brown's offense, it was a motion offense. It was space and pace. He always liked his power forwards to be stretch fours who could shoot the three-pointer. They were at their best statistically. I'd have to go back and double-check it, but I think when his offense was clicking the best, it was when Dario Saric and Ersan Ilyasova were playing at the four, and they were knocking down three-pointers, and they were stretching the floor, and they were passing the ball. So Elton Brand knows that he has a space and pace motion offense coach, and he built him a team that's a bunch of trees. When they're playing out of the post, they like to play from inside to outside, and they've kind of abandoned their motion offense this year. It's just dump the ball into somebody in the post, dump the ball into somebody in the post. Al Horford is not just going to stand there and be a spot-up shooter. Like, you got to get him screening and rolling and popping and sort of feature him a little bit more if you want him to be something, because otherwise he's just like a not secondary. What's third? Tertiary?
Yeah.
Yes,
like
tertiary.
And they've only
Great word.
And Kevin, he used to come up and do it to the Sixers all the time, where he would screen at the top and then roll and hit that little top of the key three or a foul line jumper. He's done that with the Sixers maybe 2 or 3 times I can remember all year long. Like, they never use him in that role. And we talked about this earlier, is that Brett has never been able to say, this is my offense and this is what I want to do, because they keep giving him a roster that doesn't match what his philosophies are.
No, and it was a lot easier when you had guys who weren't. I mean, when you didn't have Dario wasn't a max player. Robert Covington was not a max player. Even Markelle Fultz in there for a little bit, and J.J. Redick. Like, you had your two bona fide stars who were going to have the highest usage percentage, and then Robert Covington was just shooting some catch and shoot 3-pointers. He was a 3-and-D guy. But now you have like 5 guys who all legitimately want the ball and should have the ball. So it's almost like you're oversaturated in a way. And listen, if Horford is not going to do anything for you offensively, he's a much better defender than Dario and Ilyasova ever were. But he hasn't played like a good defender in the last couple of games. So if he's not giving you that, then there's really no point of having him out there. Honestly, some red flags should have went up for everybody when they saw that Kyle O'Quinn started alongside him yesterday instead of Brett just playing Horford at the 5 and moving Tobias Harris down to the 4. I mean, that didn't seem right to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was wondering why, and now that you bring that up, I'm starting to see that. And I'm wondering, Kev, did you see the SI.com article on the Sixers that I think came out today?
It did, yeah.
Yeah, and basically what I found alarming about it was that it detailed – now, it's not a fair comparison because the guys haven't played together this year nearly enough, but their rating is so much lower than last year's team, which was even lower than the year before. So that Saric Covington – Ben team, the team that had more shooters and less defenders, was far superior to even the one with Jimmy Butler, and both have been exceedingly superior than the one right now. So it's almost like as they upgrade, they regress from a rating standpoint, and a data and analytics standpoint.
Yeah, it's interesting. And no, I didn't see the article because after the practice, I went over to Arby's because I was starving. I didn't eat lunch. But,
great excuse. That's fine.
Did you see Kevin Pittsnoggle in there by chance?
They have the meats.
No, but that's a good West Virginia drop. I was going to try to do that later.
There you go.
I think, yeah, well, I mean, they build a team that could be the best defensive team out there, but I mean, if you're not going to come out, the defense is effort more than anything. And if you're not going to come out and do it 82 games a year, then they're going to look like they do now. I have no qualms about them being able to turn it up in the postseason. But yeah, losing JJ Redick was a big deal. Losing Jimmy Butler was a big deal, So it just, again, it's like, I don't, the other interesting quirk, so I don't repeat anything I already said, is that they're a really good three-point shooting team, believe it or not. Like, they're like a top 10 three-point shooting team. But they only shoot like the 26th most three-pointers in the league. And yet, when you look at them and you think, what's their strength? Well, they can bully anybody down in the paint because they have, a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary post-up option. So it's just like, it's just such a confusing team the way they play and the way that they're built,
Kevin, one of the things that I brought up earlier was the fact that you remember like the old Atlanta Braves teams, like they were built for the regular season, and then when they got to the playoffs, like the way they were built wasn't right. The Sixers are playing playoff basketball, but 82 games a year, and it's almost like, hey, we'll get to the playoffs playing playoff basketball irregardless of what happens to us in the regular season.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's why people should. I mean, that's if you're going to have the glass half full for anything. Again, it would go back to what I said about them beating Milwaukee and beating Miami and beating Toronto, beating everybody above them so far. Like, if you think about it, they have passed every difficult test that they've been presented with. Okay, I mean, the problem is that they can't get up to play Orlando on a Thursday night. So, I mean, it's a good problem to have. But if the team is looking ahead to the playoffs and the team is built for the playoffs and they get to the playoffs as the fourth seed and you got to go to Toronto in round 2, then that kind of like. It defeats the purpose. Like you can put yourself on cruise control a little bit, but you can't like roll in there again with 51 wins.
He's at Kevin_Kinkead, and you should check him out daily at crossingbroad.com. He covers the Sixers and everything else for Crossing Broad, and he also is a fine WVU grad, and he was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, guys, always a pleasure. And shout out Penn State, too, for Moshe.
Thank you, brother. I was starting to feel lonely.
We're out on that.
Yeah, come on, man.
All right, Kevin Kinkead, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.